A very good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this webinar. We are truly honored to have amongst us a very special guest who will enhance our knowledge on an extremely relevant topic, the first step towards judiciary. Ladies and gentlemen, we have with us a personality who is truly motivational and inspirational for all the young legal aspirants, Honorable Justice KSP Radhakrishnan. Justice Radhakrishnan was born on the 15th of May 1949. Served as a former judge of the Supreme Court of India. Prior to that, he has served as the Chief Justice of Jammu and Kashmir High Court and Chief Justice of Gujarat High Court. Sir obtained a master's degree in law in administrative law from the Cochin University of Science and Technology. He has also passed postgraduate diploma in constitutional law from ICPS New Delhi. He was enrolled as advocate on 8th December 1973 and practiced in the High Court of Kerala and subordinate civil courts of Ernakulam. Sir was a standing counsel for Cochin University of Science and Technology, State Bank of India, State Bank of Travancore, Kerala State Cooperative Rubber Market Federation, and State Trading Corporation of India. Sir is presently the Chairman, Supreme Court Committee on Road Safety from 2014 onwards, an arbitrator in the number of domestic and international arbitration matters, member at the Delhi International Arbitration Centre, New Delhi, a member at Indian Council of Arbitration, New Delhi, and a life member, International Centre for Alternate Dispute Resolution, constituted by Government of India, New Delhi. Sir has rendered judgments in various important matters on commercial law, contracts, taxation, and service matters, and also in domestic and international arbitration matters. With an utmost gratitude, we welcome you, sir, to Asian Law College. And now I would request you to please share your knowledge with our students.
Good evening to all of you, especially to young students, members, the faculty, the management, and all well-wishers. At the very outset, I must thankful to the faculty members and the core and everybody for having given me this opportunity to address students who are aspiring to come out to the law college and join the judiciary or other forums. The first, as seen, the topic today is the first step towards judiciary. I will make a caveat. Let it be not be the first step to the judiciary. You can say first step to the legal profession. Legal profession includes the judiciary also. And today's seminar, is I understand this is a lecture series you are conducting every year. And I will address you on 7 or 8 topics under the caption, first step to the judiciary. The first, I will address you, what are your role as lawyers and what is the future of young students in law as in the legal profession. Secondly, I will address you your role as a legal advisor to various companies, bank and various other organizations. Third, I will address you on your role as law teachers. The fourth, as the judicial officer, the subordinate judiciary, the High Court and the Supreme Court. Sixth, your role as a lawmaker. And the last is your role as an authors of law, legal jurisprudence. Now it's easy for me to first address you of your opportunities in the legal profession. I mean, as a lawyer first. Many of the students whom I address used to ask me advice as such. Sir, what will you do after coming out of your law college? what is the area on which we must concentrate. So there are few lawyers we find they have excelled in as a litigation lawyers, and few lawyers we find they excel as solicitors for advices. Because in my experience, I have seen there are a good orator may not be a good lawyer, because we have seen so much of parliamentarians who speak extempore in parliament or in the platform or a political platform or any other platform, but they cut a very sorry figure in a court of law. It's a altogether different ballgame in the court. So a very good academician or a very good speaker on the stage may not be a good lawyer. At the same time, a very good lawyer may not be a good author or a good legal advisor, because legal advising is very difficult, a difficult job. So first thing you must first understand, you ask yourself, you must where you are on what you want to become, because you are the master of your future, because others can only advise you. You must judge yourself. What are your talents? And if you are keen in become a litigation lawyer, of course, it's a really exciting profession, no doubt about that. And then another thing, suppose for a those who want to become a litigate lawyer, there are a lot of branches. Some lawyers may excel in civil law, some lawyers may excel in criminal law, and various other forums. Because now you are really a fortunate lot, because there are a lot of when we passed out of the law college. Of course, I was a law student, and I was a law teacher also for about 2 years. So I have judged the pulse of my students when I was a law teacher for LLM students, not for the LLM students for 2 years. So first you must understand, or you must find out what are your talents. One difficulty is most of the lawyers, young lawyers who start in the legal profession say, sir, we are not getting any brief. How long you must work with a senior lawyer? And if your senior lawyer is not your father or your uncle or somebody who was so interested in you, they hardly give any brief to you. You can go with them, maybe years and years. You can go to the court, attend the court proceedings, and sometimes the client also may not agree. The junior should argue. But I have seen a lot of clients. After a few years, they will say, let the junior argue, because that's my experience. Because fortunately, when I started practice, my father was a lawyer. He was the Advocate General of the state, and we were from the legal family. So I was also in the dilemma as to how I must proceed, because father was a very senior lawyer. So most of the clients who came to the legal office, and there are other juniors also who are elder to me in the profession. So most of the clients, they say, let the senior argue, because it's a very, in the High Court as well as Supreme Court, mostly in the High Courts also, let the senior argue. Of course, we must always appreciate the anxiety of a client. But see, after interacting with the client for 2 or 3 years, the client will judge your ability and your knowledge about the case, and your knowledge about the case laws, and your knowledge about your legal acumen. He will gauge. So slowly, that is my experience. Slowly, I've seen many clients used to say, "You argue. Why should you call your senior? Because you have studied the brief so well, and we are happy with your presentation. We are happy with your knowledge. You know better than your senior, because you are educating the senior. Then why not you argue?" So we get a lot of confidence from the client. That's the most important thing. You must gain confidence of the client. That's the most important thing, much more than the confidence of your senior. So if you are a good student of law, if you are very keen in practicing as a litigation lawyer, then you must spend your time in the office. There is no office hours. It depends upon the type of case and the work you have to work hard. So you must impress upon the client, whether it may not be your client, maybe the client who comes to your office, maybe a client of your senior. Let it be like that. That's the only thing you can start your profession. So the clients in that office will definitely gauge your ability, your knowledge, your hard work. your dedication to the profession. Slowly, slowly, he will, by word of mouth, he will tell to his friends, he will tell to the other well-wishers that he is a very good young junior. You can handle, even though not very highly sensitive cases, but small type of cases he can always handle. And he will definitely handle because he's a very hardworking lawyer. That way, you can independently handle cases rather than entrusting the case to the seniors. But I've seen many juniors also, when the client asks them to argue, or the client asks them to argue, no, he is very, very dividend. You say no. Sometimes the court will not grant any order, so that may affect my future. Don't be under that impression. As a judge, I'm telling you, for the last 20 years, I was a judge. Of course, after that, an arbitrator. So, judge is more keen in rendering justice. The mere fact that one of the topmost lawyer appear before you, and you are pitched against you are on the other side. Never think the lawyer will lean in favor of the topmost lawyer or a senior lawyer. Never, judge cannot, because ultimately judge has to decide to find out who is right or who is wrong. The mere fact that one of the senior lawyers is appearing in one side, that doesn't mean that judge will decide in his favor. Judge cannot. A conscientious judge will never do that. On the other hand, if a junior appears, in my practice, I'm telling you, if a junior appears, you'll be more careful to see that if anything the junior has missed or not. We've studied the files several times, as to sometimes because other side we know a junior is appearing. So ultimately, it's our judgment, our order. So we shall not commit mistake. Judge shall not commit mistake. Probably junior must have missed one or two important case laws. Then judge will work on that. So never be under the impression, but you must be confident. You must be confident of your case. You must be hardworking. And another thing, very important thing also I would like to address in lawyers. You must build up your own credibility. That is very important. You can commit mistake. Anybody can commit mistake. Judge can commit a mistake. Anybody can. That is very human error is very common. Anything can become facts. Probably the client might not have given you all the facts. So you may be, but consciously you shall not commit a mistake. So slowly after 4 or 5 years, you build up your own credibility, because judge can believe you. Suppose you come for an admission in a court, and sometimes it's impossible for many, especially Supreme Court and various high courts also. So you get almost 60 to 70 cases a day. Next day for admission. All are very heavy matters, and it's impossible for every judge to go through every page of that case. But we know when certain lawyers appear, we can believe his words. I'm just sharing one of my experience. When I was practicing as a junior lawyer, I have seen it on my own eyes. There's a very, at that time, a lot of civil cases, very complicated civil cases. Appeals and second appeal and third appeal, etc. Very facts are so complicated. The law is so complicated, it's very difficult to decide also. And sometimes the case will come for, and I know one judge, he's no more now. See, he has trust in few lawyers. So when the lawyer starts arguing for the admission of the case, the first question judge will ask the lawyer, Mr. So-and-so, I'm asking you, is this case is to be admitted? Is there anything in it to be admitted? Is there any legal issues are involved? Is there legal points are involved? Then that lawyer will say, sir, this is a case to be admitted. Okay, he will not even open the file. He will admit that case, because he has got a lot of other cases to be dealt with. Then after a few days, again, some lawyer will come. Then this judge again will ask that lawyer, Mr. Lawyer, I'm asking you, is anything in this case? Is the case to be admitted? The lawyer will say, sir, this is, I have filed it because of the insistence of my client. I don't find anything in this case. This is a case to be dismissed. And my client is also not there. So I'm telling you, sir, this is a case to be dismissed. There's nothing in it. So judge dismiss that case. So that way you build up a credibility of your own. So judge believes you. Because sometimes for testing, judge will also study the file, then ask the question to the lawyer. Maybe a very weak case. Nothing is probably fully covered by Supreme Court judgment. It's not a case to be admitted, only for a delaying tactics. Then knowing that judge will ask the lawyer, Mr. So-and-so, is anything in this case? then the lawyer will say, sir, nothing in this case, because this case is already covered by judgment of Supreme Court. It's only for I think there's nothing in it. So that is how the judge a lawyer. So that's very important. So build up a credibility if you like to be in the legal profession. Hard work, no doubt over that, because you have the entire landscape of litigation has been changed for the last 5 to 6 years. Now the law has become so technical now. Now the alternate type of civil cases, criminal case, that even criminal cases are becoming highly technical now. Money laundering cases, IPR cases, and so many cases. And now we are living in a digital world. Now the cryptocurrency and various type of digital issues are coming up before the court. And most of the judges in the judiciary, to be honest, most of the judges in the judiciary are not equipped to deal with more highly technical and complicated matters. So that is the reason why the lawyers should get educated. Now many young lawyers are now very good at some type of laws. For example, energy law. There's a course in Gujarat, in one of the colleges in Gujarat. They have a law on energy law. There's a lot of other type of branches are emerging on digital and data data issues. So many issues are there. So on these are many of the judges are not that keen or not equipped unless they must be properly addressed. The lawyers should be more equipped than the lawyer, because ultimately the case has to be handled by both the cases. So this is one of the aspects I would like to address you on the question of being a litigation lawyer. Another thing, there are lawyers who like to be, may not be that, and I told you that they need not be a big orator to be a successful lawyer. But some lawyers, most of the lawyers I've seen at least 30 to 40%, or even 50% or 60% of the lawyers, especially girl students, they prefer to be in the solicitor's firm. Because they get a handsome salary, yearly salary, they get a monthly salary, they get a handsome salary. So they're contented with that. Of course, they're definitely handled with very, very important cases, especially on new emerging fields. And I know many of the top law firms in Delhi, Bombay, and elsewhere. Many of the law students who become partners in the law firms, they're handling most of international law, international issues, because most of their clients are from USA, UK, and Singapore, and various other countries. So during night, we can see they're working very hard even throughout the night, because this daytime there. So they are also much wanted. That type of lawyers also is much wanted now. It's a very good exposure to them. So that also you can aspire for. Another thing I would like to address you, which I don't think anybody has addressed that issue, because immediately after my master's degree in law, so I was keen in understanding how the law is made, how we are interpreting laws. We are new legislation coming up. New laws are passed by the parliament and by the state assemblies. But you should know how the law is made. So after my master's degree, I joined the Institute of Constitutional Parliamentary Studies. At that time, it was a 6-month course. What attracted me that it was I'm talking about something that happened in the 70s. At that time, see, I had the opportunity, because there is no much security issues at that time, the Lok Sabha or in the Rajya Sabha. So we could just walk into the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha without any pass, because we had passes with us. So because of familiarity, they will allow us to get into the parliament. We'll go to the Lok Sabha Secretariat, and we sit with the draftsman just to have an experience how the law is made. And after we look at the draftsman, we sit with him in the morning to evening, and he will take every session. He will draft the object. He will how the definition clauses are to be interpreted, and how the sections are to be written, how the explanation, how the provisos, how the heading, how the chart is, and all these how to be drafted. These are done by legal draftsmen. After that, so we sit with him. We study that how the law is to be made. After that, we go to the parliament. We sit in the parliament. And we sit in the parliament and we hear the discussion of the every section in the parliament. So that was a great experience for me. So Even many of the laws, subsequent laws, I see when I hear in the some of the legal issues in the court, especially in the High Court or in the Supreme Court. I remember when this law was made, we were also sitting with the draftsman. We were also sitting in the parliament when the every session is being discussed. So also in the Rajya Sabha. So that was a great experience. So is a field, if anybody keen in becoming a good draftsman, we shall not shut out their ambition. It's also very good. They are also much sought after in the parliament, in the various assemblies. They are sought after in the parliament and also in Lok Sabha. You must understand. I'm not. I don't. I'm casting no aspersions. If you look at the parliamentarian standard now, especially legal issues, we can't compare with the doyens earlier in the parliament. There are very top lawyers in the parliament. They were the parliamentarians. So that's why many of the laws we find a lot of lacunas. When you come to the court, we find a lot of loopholes in lawmaking. So a good draftsman is very, very important aspect you must think of. And another opportunity for you to become a legal advisor in companies, in banking, insurance, and so on. Because a lot of companies require good legal advice because that's the foundation in which they build up, they take decisions. A decision running into crores and crores of rupees. So unless you commit a mistake, then it's going to really affect the company structure, company's decisions on shareholding, whether it's for shareholding or for dividend or whatever it is. So therefore, a good legal advisor to the company is very, very important. Because sometimes, of course, they definitely ask legal advice of lawyers, but that may not be sufficient. Many of the companies, while in domestic companies and international companies, they are looking for very good legal advices. Another being, I was a law teacher, so I'm a little partial to them. Law teachers' profession is a great profession, no doubt about that. And now they, of course, they are the backbone of our judicial system. Whether you become a lawyer, whether you become a draftsman, or whether you become a legal advisor, or so on, because that is the molding up of your career. So, law teacher's profession is a very noble profession. So that also you must think of. Unlike the earlier years, because we could practice when I was teaching. I was practicing as a lawyer at the same time used to teach students also. Now I think the Bar Council is not permitting that, I think. So a law teacher has to be a law teacher throughout. You can't practice law. So that is also one of the issues you must think of. Another thing also, you can, if you got the flyer, you can also think of writing law books. Because now a lot of important legislations are being made by the in our assembly, in the parliament, as well as international law also. So you good legal treaties, good legal jurisprudence is very, very important for the lawyers, for the judges and all that. That's why we find most of the lawyers in UK or in not the judges in UK and USA, they are good authors of law books. Because when I complete my LLM, I was thinking of going to some foreign university at that time. Of course, since I was in the lawyer's family, I had to be in the office, so I could not go. At that time, I wrote to one of the in the New York Law School. In the New York Law School, there is a Bernard Schwartz. Bernard Schwartz was a law professor. So I wrote to him, sir, I have just completed my master's degree, and I have got a recommendation from my dean of the university also. So I would like to be to work under you as a student. You will welcome me, but of course, due to various other reasons, because at that time my father also kept Bali. So somebody will have to run this our law firm. So I continued as a lawyer, and then became a judge, and I retired in 2014. After that, I am doing my arbitration law for the last 6 years. And arbitration is also a wonderful area which you can think of. because both international and domestic international arbitration, lot of cases are not being referred to the arbitration tribunal as a sole arbitrator or as a member of the arbitration tribunal or the presiding arbitrator, because most of the commercial agreements, there is invariably now you find a clause of arbitration. So rather, if you go to, especially in the present global scenario, see, you can't think of going to a civil court and adjudicate contractual disputes. So even though we have got commercial courts, it will take time, because even the commercial courts, not throughout the country, I think Delhi, Bombay, and various places, we have started commercial courts, and the difficulty, most of the commercial judges are not very familiar with these type of disputes to be resolved. They take a lot of time. They also commit mistake. Then we have to go in appeal and all that. So invariably, most of the contracts, there's a clause for arbitration, and they are governed by the Arbitration Conciliation Act 1996, and that covers both the national and international arbitration. For international arbitration, we have got unilateral rules also there. And to choose an arbitrator is a very important. There, his knowledge, his integrity, and is very important, because generally an arbitrator's award on facts become final, and seldom courts interfere. That is all the more reason, a lot of responsibility on the arbitrators to see that they shall not commit any mistake on facts, because court will interfere only if there is any legal infirmity. In facts, it's almost a concluded. So that is also an area you can think of as an arbitrator. That is also an emerging field, both the national and international arbitration. You get exposure. You can. There is no, unfortunately, there is no arbitration bar in your country. Even Delhi also, there is no arbitration bar. We used to say, because most of the lawyers prefer to come for the arbitration in the evening, because senior lawyers, because after court hours. So we start normally at 10:30 or 11 o'clock up to 4 o'clock. So there are now few lawyers who are fully concentrating in arbitration law alone. So that should be a separate arbitration, but that also you can think of. And these are some of the areas I have like to address you. And I think I don't want to take much of your time. And ultimately, it's for you to decide which area you must think of. And it's a lot of areas, new areas are emerging. Recently, also one of the judgments Supreme Court, that is in money law on Internet and Mobile Association, was RBI, which was 2020, a recent decision. It is a very important technical decision on cryptocurrency, digital currency and all that, and virtual currency and all that. So these type of important areas are emerging, and a lot of decisions are being rendered by Supreme Court on new fields, new emerging fields. That also you must read, and then that will, of course, develop your knowledge on which are the areas on which you must concentrate, rather than the traditional type of civil cases or criminal cases or that type of cases. There are a lot of other opportunities, and I'm very confident that law is one of the most sought after profession now, both the domestic as well as international level. You have a lot of opportunities. Opportunities are plenty. Don't be disheartened, because everybody has got a place in the present system, legal system. This is an emerging field. Lot of. I think most of the and there are few lawyers, engineers. There are chartered accountants come lawyers. There are engineers come lawyers, because engineering, accounting, finance, everything is intermingled. It's an interdisciplinary. So therefore, that also you must think of, not merely concentrate on law. You must know a little bit of finance. You must know a little bit of accounting. That will help you also. A small course. I am not saying that you must go for a chartered accountant's course. Say 6 months course in accounting. Very good. It will help you. 6 months course in finance, or 6 months course in some other areas which you like. There are a lot of other small courses are there. If you do that also, that will help you do not merely the traditional law teaching. So that you must find out which area which you would like to be there. So that's also you must think of. Not merely studying law may not be sufficient, because it will become highly technical, not only law, any field. For example, one of the surgeon was telling me, he was my relation. He was telling, sir, I did my DM or not surgery, MS, I did my surgery. But sir, I have to be an engineer also. Merely studying in medicine will not take you nowhere. You have to be an engineer. You must know how to operate the equipments. Suppose something mistake happens, you may be able to correct that also. Just like that, law means not traditional law. You must gather knowledge in other allied fields also. That will help you in your profession also. If you're a good accountant, you can immediately, any accounting principles or accounting issues are coming, you can immediately help the court, you can immediately address your client also. That also you must think of. And which are the areas on which you must specialize. Of course, you must ask yourself. You must also find. You must ask your law teachers also, which they have taught you. They will be able to guide you. You are in which area of law you must concentrate. So I'm not. I will not taking much of your time. I'm so happy that I've been given this opportunity, and I'm told that students have a few questions to ask me. Of course, I'll be very happy to address all the students and whatever questions you have. Definitely, I will try to express my views on these questions. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for such an amazing talk, sir, and actually guiding our students that there's so many opportunities that they have in this career option which they've opted for. We have received many questions, sir. If you're comfortable, can we start with the Q&A?
Yeah, please. It's okay.
Okay. A judge may err in the law and on facts, but he shall not err to his conscience. The above line said by you, is itself speaking a lot the due importance you accord to morality, ethics, conscience to legal profession. Would request you to kindly explain the role of professional ethics in the legal profession.
See, I told you, judge is not a master of law or judge is not a master of law facts. Because judge has not seen what has happened. Judge only hears. So it's somebody else's case. Just like a lawyer. Lawyer is not his own case. It's somebody else's case. Both the lawyers are arguing somebody else's case. And judge also hears a third party's case. So there's bound to be error on facts. Suppose the client has, because an illiterate client probably might not have properly explained everything to the lawyer. And lawyer also might have just believed what the client has said without going deep into the case files. So when you argue the case, you commit mistakes on facts. Law will deal separately. On facts, you commit a mistake. So that is all the more reason judge has to be more careful because he has to, sometimes it may not be intentionally, he may commit a mistake. So ultimately justice shall not suffer. So that is therefore a judge has to again go through the entire files. It's not easy. It's only one case. It's several cases coming up before the court. So it's he has only 24 hours. Now, how much how it's possible, humanly impossible. It's a violation of human rights so far as judge is concerned. So he has to go through the facts. But in that process, he may err. The judge may err. They have to go to various things. Not because of his fault. May not be the fault of the intentional fault of a lawyer. He may err. Just like on law. Law also is a field. You must on a particular section you can have different interpretation. That's why appeal is provided in our legal system. A high court judge may commit a mistake on law, so we can appeal to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court also may commit a mistake in law. That's why Lord Atkin always said, if there is another court over the Supreme Court, then they will find that many of the decisions of the Supreme Court were wrong on law.
True.
This we can compromise, no problem. There is a mistake. It's a mistake, but it shall not hurt your conscience. That is the most important thing. Human error is always possible, any human being, but your conscience should you should not hurt your conscience. Deliberately, you shall not commit mistakes. Deliberately, you will not commit a mistake on facts to help the other side or careless type of deciding. You must be very conscious when you decide a case. You must think that somebody else's case. You shall not handle the case carelessly. You must always answerable to yourself, your conscience. Why you are sitting here? It's a divine. You are deciding a very divine function. God has a distinct function. So somebody else's cost. You are deciding. So you shall never err to your conscience. That's one of the cases I said so.
Indeed.
Thank you for reminding that. I was forgetting after that.
Thank you so much, sir, for answering it. Legislature, executive, and judiciary, the three organs of government, are though constituted to function with the task of execution of different responsibilities, but we see time and again judicial overreach happening in day-to-day cases, which no doubt in the long run turns out to be beneficial for the society at large. Sir, how do you perceive the boundless role of judiciary in a social welfare state like India?
See, the first answer is if we look at our environmental jurisprudence, you will find the first answer. Was there any judicial overreach? There must be here and there some overreach, parliament may overreach, something that may happen. But if you look at our environmental jurisprudence, it is uniformly acclaimed, uniformly recognized nationally, internationally. This is one of the best jurisprudence ever created in this universe. Even many of the English courts, many of the US courts, they follow the principle laid down by us in the environmental jurisprudence. That is because that stems out of our fundamental rights and directive principle of state policy. See, directive principle of state policy it is not a fundamental right. Fundamental right is chapter 3, is the directive principle chapter 4. So directive principle of policy on which that is being given by the Constitution to us. So you shall not forget the directive principle study. That gives us a direction how much the society should go forward. It's a directive principle. It's the principles for giving a direction, which direction we should move. So there may be overreach. Few cases we can say there may be overreach here and there, not out about that. But if you look at the entire gamut of case laws, you will find ultimately you will find it cannot be said judicial overreach, even though there are the examples where the judiciary has exceeded and interfered with the field of parliament or the lawmaking case, or even sometimes executive also. But by and large, I would say that they have only contributed to society by a little bit of overreach here and there. So that the case laws will speak for itself. Case law of this country will speak for itself, whether there was an overreach or not. And assuming there is an overreach, little bit of overreach, it can always be corrected by the parliament. They can be corrected by the parliament. After the case of Ananda Bharati's case, we have said only the basic structure they cannot touch.
Sure.
It is structure. Rest, parliament can make a law that they can, even if there is an overreach. But parliament is not making a law because it's not an overreach. If it's an overreach, lawmakers are there, parliamentarians are there, make a law and make it. So people have generally recognized what the court has said. So no parliament will venture to say that this is an overreach. So we are legislating. No, so far not. So that's my view on that.
Sure. Sir, as you've been part of the bench of Honorable SP that dealt with SEBI 5 Sahara case, in which the interest of the investor was given topmost priority and Sahara was ordered to return 24,000 crores illegally collected from the investors. So despite such stringent judgments, the real estate is yet to see the sunlight of transparency and the ease of investment from consumer perspective. What is your opinion on this?
Now, this is SEBI versus Sahara. There's a landmark judgment, and that's the first time the Supreme Court has started interfering with these type of money laundering or whatever you say, or duping the investors' money, because cases are all over the world, all over the country, not only in here, all over the country. You find a lot of chip companies and various other companies, small companies, big companies. They give a lot of advertisement in the media and the social media, as well as in the electronic media, newspaper, and all that. So people get attracted to these type of these companies, and they think they invest money. They invest a lot of money. And if you look at the Sahara versus SEBI versus Sahara, you find this is an investment of tainted money. It is not a taxpayer's money. That's we find. We asked a source of this 24,000 crores of fee. We said we will definitely, relieve you from all these things, provided you show the source. You must show the source of this fund. So they could not show the source. If the source could not be shown, then naturally it is illegal money. It's a tainted money. So we said almost 15 to 16 of the investors. We wanted addresses all of them. We asked the SEBI to write a letter to all investors when this money was deposited. And SEBI has sent notices to almost several investors, and most of the letters came back. So they could not prove source. The moment they could prove source, we would have accepted that. So it was a duping investors, or it was something tainted money. So that is after that, as after this Supreme Court judgment, Sahara's case, not only this case in Sarada Chit Fund case and various other cases, the court has ventured, even the High Court and the Supreme Court has ventured to see that the investors' rights are protected, genuine investors, because the hard-earned money, maybe retirement benefits they have might have put into these type of companies, and maybe very hard those who are working in the Gulf countries or various other countries, or hard-earned workers, hard-earned money that is put into this type of company, they should be protected because they are nobody to protect them. So that is an after effect of this Sahara versus SEBI versus Sahara case. It's still going on. It's not over. Still, amount is being deposited.
Right. So these are two ways to enter into judicial services. One is through competitive examinations after completion of law course, and second one is through bar, that is after practicing in court of law. Which one do you feel is a better option and why?
I think I always advocate that a few years of practice is very good, because
Right.
straight away from the college, straight away from the after writing a test, you come to the judicial system. Is everything new to you? You do not know how to examine a witness. You don't know how to cross-examine. You don't know what is leading question. You don't know what is re-examination. You know nothing, because you are coming not to the High Court or the Supreme Court. You are coming straight away to the lower judiciary, where everything is new. You do not know how to draft a plaint, but at the same time you are reading a plaint. You don't know how to draft a return statement, but you are reading a return statement. You don't know how the commission application has to be drafted. You don't know how the interrogatories have to be put. You don't know how the discovery and inspection. You don't know nothing about practical knowledge. Of course, you go to the moot court. That is not the real court. So you must have 3 to 5 years of practice is always good for the new entrant to the judiciary. So you know what is happening, how the court functions and all that. So that is lacking in some of the judicial officers straight away come to the judiciary.
Right. So what has been the role of classroom study of law in shaping your career?
That's a very difficult question, because at that time when we were law students, there were hardly any classes as such, because we always those were studious. So that's the reality. Because unlike now, see, after this national law, that has changed the entire landscape of law teaching by national law schools in Bangalore and various places. Otherwise, you mushrooming out law colleges all over the country. There is practically no classes also there. Teachers are not motivated. They are not interested at that time. Only the higher level, say LLM level, of course, something. Otherwise, students hardly go to the school, go to the classroom. Of course, those who want to be those who are from the lawyer family, of course, they have the books and everything in their library, in their home library. Just go there and ask their father or uncle or brothers or somebody. They will ask and they will study themselves. Not much for the teachers as such. So since I was from the lawyer family, I had the advantage, because the day I was born, I am seeing only clients and law books and only nothing. So that advantage is there. So that may not be available to everybody. So unless so studious, and there is no private tuition for at that time, and most of them rely upon bare ranks and all that. Of course, they simply without anything they will pass 30%, 40%. They will pass also.
Mhm.
So I think the present system is very good because you can't compare
Right.
to the earlier one. The present system, you got the mood court, you can participate international mood court also. You can participate the intra court. The mood courts also there. That also gives a sense of what is happening. And talented law teachers are there. Good faculty is there. New emerging fields are there. Now you cannot compare with at that time. Now
Mhm.
I think that to a large extent the students are fortunate now. And,
Right.
and another thing also, because of new technology, everything you can get online. Suppose you want to read a decision, you go to a library, you get online. Suppose you want to know anything, any someone on any subject, you can Google it and get all the information. That was not there earlier.
True. Very true. Things have drastically changed in today's scenario, if we can compare. So, what motivated you to pick up law, and what was the most challenging part of your journey?
One of the that is after becoming, of course, after one I used to tell students also one aspect which motivated me a lot as an young lawyer. I indicated also in my earlier part of the speech. See, I was I was standing counsel for a particular university. I was a very young lawyer, hardly 3 or 4 years. So it's a service matter. I was pitted against a professor of a college. It was seniority, so it was seniority.
Mhm.
So I was appearing for the university. As a young lawyer, I was a junior. I was a junior standing counsel of that university, and against a professor. And the other lawyer was a very senior lawyer, private lawyer. So I argued the case. They initially to begin with, it was a division bench, two judges bench. It was in the High Court.
Mhm.
The judges were against me, so I was really perplexed because I believed, and there is a very good case. So if I lose this case, university feel that I have not properly argued that case because it is a good case. If the case to be professor's case was not good, it was be dismissed. So judges were against me. So I was very annoyed. I don't know what to say. I had taken up this case also. Of course, it's against the professor also. And so ultimately I argued. Afterwards, the judges was in my favor. I could convince that it's a good case for the university. And ultimately, the professor's case was dismissed. Mind you, the first person to congratulate me, that professor on the opposite side.
That's great.
The other client, the opposite client, not the lawyer, the opposite client came before me. He's an elderly professor. He came at me and told me, sir, he was saying you are very argued so well. I'm happy. I want to congratulate you. That
Mhm.
was a great motivation for me. So
Definitely.
next case, so I thought I will. So next case I again start arguing. So ultimately, if you argue so well, next day you are a professional. We are a professional lawyer. Next time your opponent will be your client.
Definitely. Truly inspirational, sir. Sir, another interesting question. The Honorable Supreme Court bench, which was headed by you, pronounced in 2014 Jallikattu ruling, which can be seen as one of the best examples of judiciary concern for ethical treatment of animals. The bench has referred to the concept of speciesism, discrimination against others simply for being of other species. So, still we see a wide gap in society when it comes to animal rights or ethical treatment, sir. How can we bridge the gap and make people socially responsible towards animals as well?
Right. So very important question. See,
Right.
there is one. If you look at the directive principles of state policy, you find Article 51 AG. There is a word called humanism.
Mhm.
This word humanism has now been interpreted by the Supreme Court in any judgment except this delegate judgment. What is humanism? We have got a good explanation of humanism. See, why are human being? Why are you on earth as a human being? As if you think that you are the only species who want to survive in this universe. There is no other species. There are other species as actually as important as you in this universe. You are created by God. God has created other species also. And if you don't have the other species, you don't have the environment, you will not exist. So we said every species on this earth has got his own individuality, his own that is God has destined, has created it. And you cannot say, as a human being, you have no right to kill or even to do any harm to another species. There's one exception, Section 28, so in the Prevalence of Cruelties Act, Animals Act 28, for human consumption. That will be like that. That will be like that. Still, you must respect every species on this earth. In that case, we said that earlier the jurisprudence has developed that it was all human centric. The entire law. I used to say even the United Nations Stockholm Conference or Rio Conference. If you take any international conference, they are only thinking of human beings. Even the United Nations think of only human rights. United Nations never think of animal rights. So in that case, we advocated there must be a UN body to recognize rights of animals also. That's why even the Stockholm Conference and various Rio conferences requires a relook, because we are living in an ecocentric society, not human-centric. Because in ecocentrism, every species has got its own value, its own merit. That should be recognized. It is on that principle we said we have a lot of reports from Tamil Nadu at that time. We have seen the matter. I cannot explain. I have read the reports. I cannot explain how cruel human beings are against animals. I cannot explain. If you look at the report, it is totally inhuman. You cannot think of a human being behaving like that. How cruel they are to animals. Killing an animal is a different thing. At least for eating, so if you're a non-vegetarian, you kill an animal, whatever. It is not that. It's a pleasure. They gain pleasure out of cruelty to the animals. That is what we decided to do. It's an internationally acclaimed judgment, and many of the US courts and many of the other courts also follow the principle that we have laid out.
Okay. Sir, another question here. While pursuing law, what all factors will help the students to decide their interest areas and subsequently their career, like whether to opt for civil, criminal, commercial, or IPR, or real estate, etc.? How do they actually decide their area of specialization?
Now, of course, fundamentals, every law fundamental is the same. The fundamentals, you must be thorough with fundamentals.
Right.
Constitution, of course, we cannot ignore our constitution. Constitution, you must have a good grip of our constitution, our fundamental rights, our direct principles of state policy, all of the provisions of the constitution. You cannot set it. Whichever branch you opt, constitution is a must. You must know that. Then the branch, you see, overnight you can't, you do not know which branch you have to select. But after 1 or 2 years, you will be able to judge how good you are in a particular subject. That means you must not, after passing out of law, in the 3rd or 4th year, you must think of various branches.
Mm-hmm.
But slowly start studying that branches also. Because if you are interested in sports, then sports law is there. If you are interested in atomic energy, nuclear, and all that, you got energy law is there. And if you are more inclined to study criminal type or your money laundering is the IPR is there, trademark, and so many things so many fields are there. So not before passing out, but in at least the 3rd, 4th year, think of some subject of which you have got some interest. You ask your law teacher also. I'm a good investment, and you can discuss with law teachers, or you can discuss with other lawyers or in the field. Suppose you want to take a particular field as yours, they must be practicing lawyers in that field. You can interact with them. They will also help you how to think of your career, which subject.
Right.
So that not after passing out of law, 3rd year onwards, you can think of that. So after passing out, you can immediately find out which college for higher studies you must go. So start from 3rd year.
Sure. I think that's a very relevant advice. So though we had so much to talk to you, but looking at the positive time, we'll have to restrict that. One last question, though you've given lot many advices and suggestions as of now for our students, but one very brief career advice and message for our vibrant legal minds at Asian Law College.
Can you repeat the question once again?
I'm saying, though, I know that you've shared so many suggestions with our students and you've given so many advices, One last piece of advice or suggestion for our vibrant legal minds at Asian Law College, which you can share with them. A short, brief message and a career advice.
Of course, the Asian Law College it is doing wonderfully. I read through it and it started in 1968. I'm so happy that you are molding your students so well, and they were motivated, really motivated also. And I already told the law teachers and faculty. I'm also a member of the faculty. I was a member of the faculty for 2 years, so I'm also a law teacher. So I always look at my students because that is a great satisfaction you get it. Because when you see your students are in high places, what more is required? That is the great satisfaction of a law teacher also.
Right.
I'm so happy that your management is taking so much of interest. I have seen the previous number of previous cases. Every year you bring the best to this function. That also a great motivation for the students. And I'm really happy that you're doing wonderfully well. And I must congratulate the faculty, the students, and all the other well-wishers of your college. And let the mantle or the flag of this Asian Law School fly very high, and let it have the international recognition also.
Thank you so much, sir.
That the international students also come here, because I remember I inaugurated one function in Gujarat. It is on Forensic University. In Gujarat, they got a Forensic University. I presided over the function, and at that time when I was Chief Justice of Gujarat, at that time Prime Minister Modi was the Chief Minister of Gujarat at that time. So I was presiding that. In that, we found that a lot of this forensic science unknown to many of them. Forensic science is so integrated with the criminal jurisprudence of this country, because now most of the criminal cases are decided become very high tech. Most of the criminal crimes have become very high tech, and most of the cases can be decided only on the basis of circumstantial evidence. When you look at the circumstantial evidence, forensic science is a very important thing. So the Gujarat, they started University of Forensic University, and for the first batch we have seen a lot of international students have joined that university. International students, especially from Asian countries. So we should have such courses in your curriculum, in your university, in your college, so that you attract new subjects. So you get a lot of international students also coming here.
Definitely.
Especially from Asian Pacific regions. So that also you must think of. That is good for our students also. So we get a lot of these Asian Pacific countries, we can attract students from them. That's a great learning process for all of us. That also you must think of. That's what I want to advise your management.
Indeed, sir.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, sir. I would like to present a little vote of thanks to you. It was a pleasure to host you at Asian Law College, and it was indeed a very, very informative and helpful session for our students. On behalf of the directors, the management, faculty members, and students, I extend this vote of thanks to you, and we look forward to a continued association with you. To acknowledge your presence today, sir, we would like to present a memento.
Okay, thank you. Namaskar. We're so happy.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time, and we hope for such sessions in future as well with you.
Thank you all my students, all my faculty members, and the management. Thank you so much
Thank you, sir.
For giving me this opportunity. Thank you so much. Take care. All the best.
Thank you, sir.